I never knew what I did to deserve this fate. How innocent I was. Just a guy spending his paycheck, you know? I was never really good at video games. I played my first video game at the age of 16, an old Zelda game. It wasn't much, but it was all new to me. Seeing all the cool ads of the more modern games and game systems, I decided to buy a PlayStation 3. I went to a local GameStop to buy a PS3. I was excited and slightly nervous in a weird way. I didn't know what to expect. I walked in and walked straight over to the manager and asked for a PS3 to buy. He told me to wait a little bit while he goes in the back to grab the console. I walked around the shop and I saw a few games that I might be interested in. I grabbed 2 games, Uncharted and Lair. I walked up to the register when the manager came back with the PS3. I handed him the money and he rang up the console and games. He soon asked, "Is that everything you're looking to buy?" I took a last look at the things to make sure that I was satisfied with my purchase, and then I looked over to see a disc in a used game packet. I read the title, Borderlands. I asked him about it, and he explained the game in great detail. It seemed interesting to me. I'd never heard of a shooter RPG, so I decided to buy it. I walked out of the store with a half-empty wallet and a smile on my face. After I got home and hooked up the PlayStation, I popped in the game Lair. The game focused on battles fought on the backs of dragons. I thought the game was boring after an hour or so I ejected the game. I then took a look at the used Borderlands game. It sounded so good. I wondered how much someone would have to play it until it got boring enough to return. I put in the game and I waited in excitement and curiosity. During the intro, I laughed harshly. Even though the idea of a tiny animal being run over by a bus is a bit dark, the game did it in a way where you didn't feel like crap for laughing. I looked through the characters and picked the siren, Lilith. I completed the tutorial in about 15 minutes. The game was easy to learn, and I thought the combat was unique. There was always a rush of excitement when I opened a chest. I got a mission from Zed to kill a few creatures that roam around the outside of Firestone, named Skags. While killing the monsters, I saw flashes on the screen. They only popped up for a second and disappeared, so I couldn't really read them. On my way back to Firestone, I saw some bandits and psychos running and shooting towards me. I killed the bandits easily, but I struggled with the psycho. He was lashing furiously at me. I never thought the game would make them that fast. I shot him with everything I had. With every bullet that hit him, he flinched and took a second to start charging at me again. It looked like he was in pain, but the 7th shot to the head did the trick. While dying, he got on his knees and shouted, "Liar!" I ignored the strange insult, thinking it was one of the humorous death reactions all the human characters make. I went back to Zed and turned in the quest. He then gave me another quest, this time to see a man named TK Baha. I started to walk out of town when more of the flashes started near the exit of town. I turned around everywhere, trying to see if an enemy was causing the flashes. They stopped when I turned to see a psycho lean against one of the buildings. I aimed down my sights on him, but his health bar was green, meaning he was an NPC. I walked over to him to talk. He said, "Hey kiddo, looking for a mean gun?" Quest option came up to accept or deny. I accepted the quest for more XP and cash on the side. He had an assault rifle in his hand and pushed it out towards me. The gun was black with red lines streaming from the barrel. It looked like the tool of a reaper. "This thing will get you some tasty shots. I stole this from the old vault hunter who was in charge here. I'll let you have it for that dumb pistol you got there." I took the gun and he received my pistol. It said, "Quest complete." He thanked me when I turned in the quest. "Thanks, kid. It's I've been waiting to do this for a long time. I thought it was some kind of cutscene, so I sat and watched. He pointed the gun towards his head and shot. It took him a few times until he actually died, as if the gun wasn't strong enough to kill him with the first shot. I thought it was simply one of those dark humor jokes that the game normally threw out. I didn't think it was funny though. I guess I didn't get the joke. Then I went to TK Baja. I encountered a few skags on my way. The gun wasn't good at all against the monsters. It was even worse than the pistol. I was angry. I can't believe the game ripped me off. It took me a bit, but I managed to kill the skags and made my way to TK's place. About an hour and a half later, I got a quest to kill some boss named Nine Toes. I was inside his base of bandits, and they were a couple of levels above me, and I was nervous. To top it all off, I was stuck with a bad gun. I'd buy another, but I didn't have enough cash. I chose to suck it up and storm through the base. But something unexpected happened. It was easy to kill the bandits despite their levels. I thought it was great. I was so powerful, it made me feel like a pro. As it progressed, more and more flashes popped up. It froze for about 5 seconds. I read the screen. It spelled out the word no in scratched up wicked writing. I didn't know what it meant. I just assumed the previous owner just added in a couple of glitches to freak out the new owner. I shrugged it off, but it still bothered me. I found Nine Toes and his 2 pet skags. I killed both the skags in mere seconds, and it took me about 30 seconds to slay Nine Toes. As he died, he started laughing. It sounded horrid. Honestly, I thought he was insane. I don't know why, but I started laughing. I couldn't find a reason why. I laughed until he died, and then I looted him. After leaving his base, I saved the game and went to bed. After work, I went straight to my TV. I quickly turned on the PS3, and I finally got a high enough level to use my skill, Phase Walk. I went back to TK Baja to turn in the quest, and while he was talking, my finger slipped when I was trying to skip the cutscene and I hit the R1 button. I shot TK, and he flew back on the wall. I knew that wasn't normal. You aren't supposed to be able to attack NPCs. He wasn't dead, but he moaned in pain, asking why I would do that. He held his wound. His health bar was nearly gone. I felt bad, and I couldn't take his moaning anymore. I took a final shot on him. I didn't aim, but the bullet hit his head. His head exploded into chunks everywhere. I nearly threw up at how graphic it was. Another flash then appeared on the screen. It read. That was funny. Didn't it feel nice to know he's okay again? I dropped the controller and I turned off the console and the game. So, it was past midnight. My brother and I were checking out the new DLC for Fallout 3 called Point Lookout. It had just been released at the time. He was the one playing, and I was on the bed next to the computer, observing. If you're familiar with this DLC, then you know that there is a mission in which you are sent to retrieve a very special book for an old man living in one of the mansions on Point Lookout. The book was called the Krivbekne, and later on, you find out that it supposedly had some kind of dark power and needed to be destroyed. You can either give it back to the man, or destroy it by taking the book to the Dunwich building in the Capital Wasteland. As my brother is interested in the occult stuff, he found this quest really interesting. Before even doing anything more with the quest, he went on the Fallout wiki and looked up all the info he could find on the book and what would happen after. I thought it was stupid of him to get everything spoiled if he found it such an interesting quest. But he said he somehow felt like some kind of greater importance was part of it. After shooting through the ritual site, killing all the swamp folk there, he decided to try destroy the book, which forced him to go back to Capital Wasteland, the original game world. At this point, he didn't have enough caps to buy another riverboat ticket, so he killed Panada, a trader in Point Lookout at the docks, and took all of our caps. I found this very strange, as my brother isn't playing as a bad character, and normally would always do the moral and right thing, wanting good karma. But not this time. After coming back to the riverboat docks in the capital wasteland, he began making his way towards the Dunwich building. Girdershare, the place where you get the Nuka-Cola challenge, was the closest location discovered, so he went there, only to realise that the place was deserted. The two people that used to live in the town had vanished. We thought it must have been a game bug, as my brother never killed them. We ignored it and moved on. Finally, he arrived. He went through the levels pretty quickly. He witnessed the hallucinations and the self-opening doors. We weren't really scared by any of that, because we knew how it was going to happen. He got to the underchambers and placed the book on the creepy looking altar, and it somehow completed the mission by destroying the book. At this point, my brother figured it'd be a good time to head to Rivet City to sell some of the stuff that he'd got from Dunwich. Guess what? Not a single person could be found there. At this point, we were getting freaked out. We checked other settlements, Megaton, Citadel, Tenpenny Tower. All of them were empty. We restarted the game and reloaded, but nothing helped. We figured that we could go back to the Point Lookout and see if anyone was left there. The only problem was that Tobar, the guy who owns the boat, wasn't around anymore either, so we couldn't buy a ticket. When my brother was about to leave the boat again, he was attacked. Attacked by all the very same people missing from all the settlements. It must have been over 100 people just charging the boat, throwing grenades, shooting missiles, really wanting my brother dead. He didn't really have anything that could kill all the people at once, so we thought it'd be a good idea if we went into the little cabin on the boat and waited for them to come. That didn't work out as planned. They didn't run in. Instead, someone with a fat man launched a mini nuke into the cabin, completely blowing my brother into pieces. Right after that, the game froze and we restarted it. Now, everything was fine. No one attacked us and everyone was exactly where they were supposed to be. Misfortune is an obscure game for the original Game Boy. Since no known hard copies or ROMs exist, all information about the game is derived from personal accounts and scant assemblages of screenshots. The game does not contain any credits, and whoever created it is still unknown to this day. The few people who have experienced it consider it to be one of the scariest video games ever made. Given its age and its cult following among rare horror game enthusiasts, it's entirely possible that the authors of widely known creepypastas such as Sonic.exe and Lavender Town Syndrome drew inspiration from Misfortune. The player controls what appears to be a young boy in a strange gothic building. After brief exploration, the player is confronted by a malevolent being. Despite the character never identifying itself, some people, citing notable similarities, claim that it may be a representation of Baphomet, Beelzebub, or even the devil. Upon meeting the mysterious creature, a dialogue box will appear, and the text will say, "I exist within the very fabric of reality. Do you want to challenge me?" This is followed by a yes or no choice. Should the player choose yes, the being replies, "Then let's begin." The player is then transported to a series of maze-like rooms, each filled with pit drops, locked doors, keys and traps. The objective for the player is to progress through each of the rooms by either reaching the stairs to the next level or solving another kind of puzzle. This can include answering riddles or choosing correct doors or pathways. The most well-known example is a level where 4 small cabins are shown on a screen. A dialogue box will appear that reads, "Choose wrong, and misfortune will befall your loved ones. Are you ready to play?" Should the player ever make a mistake throughout the game, the screen will cut to black before showing a more detailed image of the demon, along with a dialogue box reading, "I am God here," in what appears to be blood-styled writing. Rumours pertaining to the game's alleged harmful effects began to surface on the internet around the late 1980s. Players claimed to have begun experiencing ongoing depression and dread shortly after losing and seeing the game overscreen. Once prominent members of online forums who told such claims are thought to have either died or disappeared when they suddenly became inactive without warning. Heated discussions soon dominated these forums for some time, but the mystery never seems to be getting any closer to being solved. Some wrote off the whole thing as a tasteless practical joke. Others believed that viewing the image of the evil character after losing the game can really cause the player to experience misfortune, as the game's antagonist promised. Soon, people began to speculate that the eerie soundtrack of the game was the cause. The music in the game consisted of deep, buzzy tones and off-key melodies. The game had a remarkably unsettling soundtrack, despite the composition being limited to the 8-bit Game Boy sound bank. The game Overscreen had especially erratic, almost nauseating music, with a very high frequency that accompanied it. Rumour has it is that this very track could somehow influence moods and thought patterns. Of all the tracks in the game, only the theme that plays when first meeting the demonic entity can be found on the internet today. Searching for playable ROMs or cartridges online is futile, because none exist. In fact, most of those who have played it hadn't sought it out, but rather stumbled upon it by accident. According to a first-hand account, certain copies of various Game Boy titles could contain misfortune in its entirety. The means for accessing it through these games vary, but typically involve exploiting glitches or using cheat devices, although some had detailed what they had done to trigger misfortune to start. Attempts by others using the same methods had always failed. Another common observation was that many of the sprites of Misfortune had been copied from its host game. Misfortune is known to be integrated into the following: Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening, Pokemon Red, Spud's Adventure, Poochie Carrot, Atelier Marie. For this section, I'm going to be speaking to a lot less impartially and a lot more personally. It's important you get this part. Now, is the game really cursed? Does a spectre really bide within and snare the innocent in its game? Who knows? What I do know is that the game definitely exists. I also know what it can do. I've never played it myself, you see, but I knew someone who did. A good friend of mine, actually. We were closer than brothers, and we told each other everything. He was the most enthusiastic, outgoing guy I ever met, and like me, he was really into video games. Sure enough, one day he told me about a spooky new side game hidden in Pokemon. He showed it to me, and even back then it gave me an odd feeling. Though, to be fair, I was always easily scared. Soon after, he started talking less and less. Later, he'd either ignore my calls or tell me he was sick or busy when I invited him out. He became something of a recluse. I did still sometimes get to see him at high school, but he rarely spoke and snapped at me when I'd pried too much over why he was acting that way. About a month later, before he got off the train after school, he said goodbye for the first time in weeks. I'll never forget the look he gave me that day. He was the macho, nothing gets to me type, and he always masked his emotions very well. But now, he had a face filled with grief. He was about to cry. He made me promise him one thing before he left: that I never play that game. That was the last time we spoke. The next morning, they found a scratched and bloody corpse hanging from a disassembled weight machine. The police concluded that he managed to lift 220 pounds of weights over his head with the cord still attached, looped it around his neck, and released it over the other side of the machine, causing his strangulation as the weight on the other side yanked him upwards. The most horrible detail was that he was found with his hands clutching the inside of his makeshift noose, as if he was trying to tug it loose. That was it. The case was closed. Personally, I don't believe that's what happened. If you're a collector, or perhaps you've just heard the legend and wanted to experience the game yourself, you should reconsider. Even if you deny the existence of demons and curses, the misfortune that will befall you is very real. You've been warned. Liberty City really comes to life at night. During the day, it's crowded, yeah, but not quite the same as the night. Nothing beats sitting on the top of a skyscraper and staring down at the array of lights blinking and flashing in every direction. Occasionally, you can see a helicopter or plane pass in the distance. It's all so full of life. Who would have thought that just under everyone's feet is the ongoing network of tunnels and subway tracks? The trains run all through the night, from the lighted loading stations into the depths of those damned tunnels. Down in the heart of the trams lies a vast intersection of tracks. This area is also where a couple of hundred homeless people flock to escape the cold and the police. Most people like to call it Hoboland. While I've not been down there myself, I have heard stories from people that have. A couple of accidents happened which caused the train to shut down right on the tracks. People there conversed with the homeless people and came back with wild stories of a strange being that apparently lived down in the subway. This man could actually run swiftly, almost in a scurrying fashion according to several witnesses. The story eventually evolved to where the man was supposed to have an excess of body hair and the face of a rat, deeming the name Ratman. It made the nighttime subway ride home all the more unnerving. I work in one of those skyscrapers you see at Liberty City. Most of the time, I get off at 9 PM, just as the nightlife is starting to pick up. But it's almost always dark by then. A few of my co-workers take the subway home at night too, one of whom is actually a close friend. At some point around a year ago, my friend, we'll call him Geordie, was caught up in one of the trams breaking down. Not even 300 yards away was a maintenance entrance or exit for the tram workers. So, Geordie told the driver that he would just walk up to the exit and ride a taxi home, while the rest of the riders stayed aboard. Geordie climbed off and started his short hike out of the subway. The only thing that is known after that is that around 4 AM, police found Geordie walking down the street in a daze. He was covered in an orangish goo with the same texture as blood and stank like feces. It took a couple of weeks for Geordie to even respond, and once he did, he still had no memory of what happened between approximately 10:30 PM and 4 AM when he was found. I tried to talk to Geordie, since he was a good friend of mine, but he didn't appear to be the same man, until at least 3 months later. After that, he returned to work and resumed his life, but still talked noticeably less than before. One day, he and I were alone on our lunch hour, and he started to speak again. It was the first time I had actually seen him speak more than a couple of words since the incident. "I saw the rat man," he said, staring at his glass. "You saw what?" I asked, thinking he was still delusional. "Actually, I fought him," Geordie said. "He just came running at me. And before I knew it, I was being clawed up. It was mainly just scratches, but just the way he moved. It was so fast." Geordie shuddered. "I managed to land one good hit on him and dug my thumbs into his eyes before he started emitting this orange-coloured blood. That was what really got me. The smell was unbearable. I wasn't sure how to react." "What happened next?" I asked him. "He ran off after I got his eye. I'm certain he didn't die," Geordie said, avoiding eye contact. "He's still out there somewhere, and I have to finish him off." After that, Geordie became obsessed with this figure living in the subways. He'd often stay up at night riding the trams back and forth, hoping that it would break down. Other times, Geordie would actually take the extreme step of climbing down onto the tracks and following alongside them in the darkness, armed with a camera and a knife. He snapped pictures of anything that looked suspicious. I only saw Geordie a handful of times after he became so fixated on the Rat Man. Once, I visited his apartment. It was absolutely littered, with newspaper clippings, sketches, printed articles, and alleged pictures, all of which supported the cryptid living in the subway. They dangled from his ceiling and covered the floors, walls, and even his bed. Geordie himself looked horrible as well. He rarely showered or shaved anymore, so he stank along with the apartment. I tried to convince him to go get help and try to clean himself up, along with his home. But he refused, and I eventually left, defeated and worried about my friend. A few weeks later, Geordie quit showing up at work. It was just like that. No notice, no excuse, just complete absence. When my boss tried to phone his house, there was no answer. We all decided it'd be best to visit the apartment again, seeing as he had lived alone. When we approached the apartment complex, there was a large group of police officers surrounding the entrance. Apparently, Geordie wandered off into the black tunnels of the Underground Railway one night and just never returned. A full-scale search was started 3 days after he didn't return to his apartment building. The search team ventured towards the heart of the subway, all the way to flocks of homeless people, where they questioned many of them. A few of the more competent hobos reported seeing a troubled man matching Geordie's description. According to them, the man, thought to be Geordie, was distraught and nearly sprinting towards one of the tunnels. He was holding a flashlight and had it aimed in the direction he was running. After that, nobody saw or heard anything else. After 3 more weeks, the search was closed and Geordie was given up for lost. There was never a body recovered, nor any evidence to suggest any fate for my friend. Since then, I've avoided using the subway. I just can't seem to bring myself to see those tunnels again. However, some of my co-workers still take the trams home at night. The trains still break down at times, and stories still come trailing back from the depths. The homeless people still see a furry figure traversing the dark passageways of the tunnels. However, now there's a new series of sightings. Every so often, it's reported that beams of light sometimes flash past the distant tunnels. The description matches almost perfectly with that of a flashlight. Part of me feels that Geordie died the night he ventured off the train and fought whatever was in the tunnel. But the other part of me thinks he's still down there, and whatever it is he needs to finish, well, I hope he succeeds. Are you familiar with the game 100 Doors of Revenge? If not, I'll explain the concept. Simple problem, such as getting into the elevator to continue on. Complicated solutions. Games like that get under your skin, until you can move on and finally beat the game. Then, someone made a game called Saving Skylar. When asked about the older style graphics, the developers replied that they had a lot going on in the last level and they wanted the game to run quickly without taking too much storage. They sort of teased the Game Informer readers by being all mysterious about the winning level. They gave a little info on the background though. Sam, a big fan of iPad games of that genre, could hardly wait for it to come out. When it did, he played every time he got the chance. Level 1 was an apt demonstration of how the game actually worked. Skylar was shackled to the floor. There was a sandbag attached to a rope, and Sam unwittingly picked it up. The rope snapped, and a blade descended on Skylar's head. Her arms flew up, blood sprayed, and the words, "I win," flashed on the screen. Sam tried again. He tried to move her before the blade came down. He checked if the shackles were really locked. He tried using the sandbag to block the blade. He was legitimately pissed when he noticed a tiny bit of gold at the foot of the stairs. A key. Damn. He unlocked the shackles and he and Skylar ran off, only for her to get lost and trapped again. Knowing how the mechanics worked, Sam got pretty far. One level stumped him only because it was so simple, but he eventually figured it out. Then, he reached level 60. It was Skylar in a glass tank. There was a shovel on the floor, as well as knobs and a stick. The graphics were different. Not exactly modern, closer to the early Sims graphics. First, Sam picked up the stick and picklocked the tank. It opened, and he climbed inside to fetch her, and the door slammed shut behind him. The time went on fast forward to a month later. Starving, he and Skylar were eating each other. Skylar won. I win flashed again. Sam was disturbed by the blood, but he wanted to win the game. Next plan. He took the shovel and started beating the cage with it. Sam noticed the hero looked irritated, and the more he beat the cage, the more the walls fell in. Skylar was crushed. Sam almost spat at the screen when I win flashed yet again. He hadn't beat 59 levels to stop now. He flicked the first switch when the level reloaded. Fire shot from the walls and the cage, leaving a seared, convulsing corpse. Sam almost dropped the iPad. He was used to gore on big screens. Not in these games. I win. Yet again. Sam wasn't going to be freaked out. Irritated and startled only to lose. He pressed restart level. The second switch this time. It would have to work eventually, right? Yes. Completely right. Acid, piranhas, blades, cheese graters, vomiting up insides, everything. Sam couldn't count how many times he watched Skylar die, but the game kept track. It just played the gone wrong sound when Sam held the iPad to the floor and started running. The horrifying angry look on the hero's face, Skylar's dying screams over and over, only changing in intensity. And those words, I win. Sam had never won. It was all for nothing if you couldn't beat the game. And he couldn't. He was screaming at the top of his lungs, running down the street with only a vague idea of killing boarding studios. He could feel the nightmares coming, as you can feel the snapping of a branch. 2 months later. Sam had died in his sleep in a ditch. No one has found his body yet, but people had found a different thing to talk about. A video was making its rounds on YouTube. The 60th level of saving Skylar beaten. Well, not really beaten. A guy had hacked the system to make it run over what had to go down before you won the game. According to the guy, you had to lose 500 times before a special item appeared. A pistol. By this point, the hero's face was contorted with rage. It was a clue. Take the pistol, kill Skylar. When the hero did this, shooting her 4 times between the eyes, I win didn't flash. Instead, in a child's voice you heard, But, no! You can't do that! You're supposed to save her! All I wanted to do was scare her into loving me again. The child's voice sobbed during the credits. For crying out loud, what is wrong with my family and creepy stuff always happening to us? Sorry. Let me elaborate. I'm Sally Goodman, one of the 3 Goodman siblings. The other 2 are John Goodman and Henry Goodman, my brothers. Lately, freaky things have been happening to us. First, John gets haunted by some insane ghost hag. Then a freaky mutant girl's face is staring through Henry's living room window. I prayed to God that nothing would happen to the 3rd of the Goodman siblings. But nope. Something just had to happen to me. Because I guess the world hates me. Alright, enough with the self-pity. On with my story. I ain't got all day. Well, I'd moved into an apartment in Dayton, Ohio. I was unpacking my things and so forth. There was a small storage room by the patio of the apartment, and I opened the door to put some things in there. It seemed to be empty, so I walked in. Then I looked down on the floor and saw that I'd almost stepped on a black USB drive. I picked it up and stuck it in my pocket. I was curious as to why it was left sitting in the storage closet, and also if there was anything on it. I had my laptop with me, so I decided to see for myself later on after I unpacked a few more things. Well, later on in the day, after I'd done all the unpacking for that day, I got out my laptop and turned it on. It didn't have an internet connection, since I still needed to get Comcast to transfer over my cable and phone services over to my new home. Just in case there were viruses on the drive, I loaded up Windows XP on a virtual machine. I plugged in the USB drive, and it did the usual auto-run thing, prompting me with what I wanted to do. I chose to open the folder and view the files. What was in the drive seemed to be files for some kind of game. I ignored those and actually found the game, which was named knob.exe. I opened up the file and a new window popped up. It was the game. It seemed to be some kind of 16-bit platformer game. You controlled some stick figure thing and guided him through the levels. There was no title screen or anything, it just went right to the first level. The level was some city streets or something, and you had to avoid traffic to get through the level. The really weird part was that every now and then someone walking along would notice the stick figure and scream bloody murder. The stick figure would then proceed to grab the person and strangle them to death. I got through the first 4 levels, but then I got to the 5th level. Instead of a city street, the stick figure was standing inside a storage room. My heart skipped a beat when I realized where it was. It was a perfect 16-bit replica of the storage room I'd found the USB drive in. Without me even moving him, the character walked over to the door and opened it. He went outside and the scene transitioned to another familiar place, the patio just outside my apartment. Out of paranoia, I looked through the glass door leading out to the apartment patio, and to my horror, somebody was there. It was the most disturbing creature I'd ever seen. He was completely naked and hunched over like a gorilla. He was horribly skinny and so pale, it looked like he'd never seen the light of day in his life. Black fur grew along his spine, and his face, he wore an expression of unspeakable malice and insanity. His mouth was 2 times the size of a normal human's mouth. His teeth were huge, and his evil smile stretched up all the way to his forehead. He had long black hair that drooped down to his shoulders, and he had claws longer than his fingers, and they looked sharp enough to cut my head clean off. Then the thing I dreaded the most happened. He looked up at me, with his cold, wicked eyes and that horrible smile. I glanced back at my laptop screen for a second. The stick figure on the game was looking into the glass window door, just as this terrible creature was doing. I looked back, and the creature was beckoning me over with his bony, clawed index finger. The character on the game was also beckoning. I don't want to go to this beast. I couldn't. But I'd lost control of my body. I got up and walked straight into the clutches of that monster. I tried to turn away, but my body fought back. I opened the glass window door and stepped out onto the patio. Being close up to this thing was even worse than seeing him from inside my apartment. He held up a map for me to see, and pointed out some directions with his wicked sharp claw. Then, he held up that claw to my throat. He sliced. I woke with a start, sweating and breathing heavily, heart pounding against my ribs like hammer. It was just a dream. After a while of just sitting there, I calmed down. It seemed I'd fallen asleep sometime while playing the game. I mean, I guess it made sense. I have been having trouble sleeping the past few nights, and I was probably tired. I looked at the laptop screen. Then there was a message saying that the game had encountered a problem and needed to close. Blah blah blah. I became curious about the directions the creature in my dream had given me. They were real directions to a real place. Some pond around the area. I decided just for the heck of it that I'd go there tomorrow. I didn't expect to find anything since it was only a dream, but still. The next day after breakfast, I got in my car and followed the directions to the pond. I got there and got out of the car. I skipped some rocks and such for a few minutes, not having much of a reason to stay. Then I started to walk back to the car. But then, I noticed something on the ground out the corner of my eye. I stopped and went over to examine it. It was a wooden trapdoor of some kind. I remembered the nightmare I had, and I'd become quite paranoid. But then I realized how silly I was being. It was just a dream. Nothing bad can really be here, right? There was a handle on the trapdoor that I could lift to open it. Cautiously, I grabbed the handle and pulled up to reveal the darkness below. I needed a flashlight. I thought I had one in the back of my car, so I went to go and check, and sure enough, I found one. I turned it on and climbed down into the darkness below. The space was empty, with nothing but dirt on all sides. But then my flashlight shined on something that made my blood run cold. Something that made me sprint back out of the trapdoor, slamming it shut behind me, and back to my car to drive home and smash the USB drive. And then I burned the pieces. The disturbing part is the hissing sound the drive made when I did this. Like some terrible snake. It was a figure, hunched over like a gorilla. Horribly skinny and pale, fur on its spine, drooping black hair, an insane deformed face. It was the creature from my nightmare, and he was looking right into my eyes. The following was taken from a newspaper article. Several sightings of a horribly mutant humanoid figure wandering the streets of Ohio cities have been reported. The supposed witnesses describe it as being a pale figure, hunched over like a gorilla, having black fur along its spine, vicious claws and long black hair, and a terribly large mouth, and an expression of pure malice and insanity. Some witnesses report seeing it strangle people to death, seemingly at random. It would be easy to dismiss these claims as some sick joke, if it wasn't for the sudden and mysterious deaths of several people. Every person who had died has been identified as strangled to death. John Goodman says, "Hey Sally, thanks for sending this to me." More of this creepy crap. I've never been superstitious, but I'm seriously starting to think we're cursed or something. This chain of freak shows that's been going down lately can't just be dumb luck. Henry Goodman says, "Yeah, we seem to be attracting the paranormal like magnets. First you, then me, and now Sally. I don't know what's going on, but I hope it ends soon." Anonymous says, "You hope so, huh?" It was the winter holiday, and my family was visiting for December. One of my favourite pastimes was playing video games with my cousins. We weren't a well-off family, so we would often play older games on what seemed like an antique television. Switching on the TV, it immediately cut out with a flash. The TV died. We decided to go into town and get a replacement the following day. Visiting a few pre-owned electronic stores, we chanced upon a curious little set. It looked about 10 years old. I was pretty sure it still worked though, so I took the chance. When my cousins and I got back to my place, we set it up, checking which channels worked. I found in the remote compartment that it still had its original warranty, which expired on the 31st of October 2003. That kind of amused me. The TV channels were crap, despite the set having its own aerial. We soon learned that all the channels had snowy reception, except for channel 0, which was for video input. I played some multiplayer games with the cousins for a while. They had since gone home when I moved on to some more atmospheric games. I loaded up Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem. To those unfamiliar with the game, it's a horror game based around the effects of the protagonist's mental health. The very instant I powered up the game, there was a flash of lightning followed by some thunder outside. I thought nothing of it, as it had been raining on and off throughout the day. Admittedly, I was new to this game, so my character died a few times to begin with. The sky crashed with thunder and lightning outside, but what was really strange was that I could swear the TV started to leak a bit from the top corner of the screen. I wiped it away, and the tissue revealed a wet red substance. What was this? Blood? No. Maybe this was some kind of technical defect. But why red? I played more of the game, and my character died a few more times. The TV started to leak again, but the fluid was a light green this time. I wondered if maybe the circuitry of the TV was melting from overheating, but the set wasn't really hot when I touched it. The red could have come from an LED light or something. I never noticed this problem when I played games with the cousins before. Then the light bulb in my room died. I thought about replacing it, but decided it might be fun to play in the dark. I played more of the game and my character's sanity was still quite high. A jump scare flashed on the screen of a skull with eyes screaming. At the very same time, a flash of lightning and thunder occurred outside. The sanity meter on screen had decreased to just over half. With all that going on, I was pretty freaked out, but most by how the character's sanity seemed to mirror my own. I gave it a rest for a while. I paused the game to get myself a drink. I thought it was odd how the sky flashed and thundered outside, only as I played the game. I had a break from the game almost as long as I'd been playing it, and yet, nothing. No thunder or lightning. Not even once. I returned to playing the game, and eventually ran into a group of living skeletons. I was doing well to hold them off, but they seemed to keep coming from nowhere. Eventually they closed in on me, but they stopped. They stood there for a while, before suddenly turning to the camera and screaming. Their scary leering head zoomed towards the screen. I jumped and screamed. The channel then cut static. It occasionally flashed between red and green colours, and another screaming skull right up close. My door slammed shut, the window locked, and the curtains swiftly drew themselves together. I couldn't open either. And among the red and green flashing image on the TV, it suddenly cut to black, with a subtle droning noise. Confused, I went up close to the screen. One final skeleton head rushed towards the screen and screamed. The TV switched itself off. I was the most scared I'd ever been. This was the kind of thing that only really happened in my nightmares, waking from sudden images and screaming sounds to dead silence. I got a torch and shone it on the TV's on-off switch. It didn't appear to be on or off, but as I tried to press it, it wouldn't move at all. I figured it was best to try and get some sleep, as impossible as that seemed. I eventually drifted off. I was awoken to a loud crash of thunder and lightning outside, with what seemed like a small earthquake starting up. The tremors grew rougher and louder, to the point where even my bed couldn't stay still. The roof was shaking, and all the tiles broke away to reveal dark purple sky, with a black vortex cutting right through it. It pulled me up into the void. All I could do was watch the house get smaller and smaller, the town's lights get dimmer and dimmer. I was pulled above a sheet of clouds, and at this point had trouble breathing. The clouds and purple sky faded, the colour beneath my feet getting darker and darker, until little glowing balls of light began to emerge. Choking profusely, I realised that I was now in space. I turned around to see a big skull as a planet. It screamed and zoomed towards me. That was the last thing I saw. Or so I thought. I felt a sting in my arm before awaking in a bright white room. My arms crossed over each other. I was happy. So happy that I laughed, and laughed, and laughed, and laughed. It started when my well-worn laptop finally gave out on me. Years of avid daily gaming finally caught up with it, resulting in heavy internal damage, or so they told me at the repair shop. And so, I was left to search out a new computer to feed my gaming addiction. However, cash was tight, so I didn't really have much to spend, which meant that any decent rig was out of reach without months of saving. Months without a computer? Unacceptable. I quickly hit the used computer scene, pawn shops, flea markets, and eventually Craigslist. After about a week of steadfast searching, I eventually struck gold on Craigslist. A high-dollar gaming laptop, being given away. I immediately contacted the poster and inquired about it. Fortunately, even though others had contacted the poster, the computer was still available due to the poster living in a somewhat remote location and his reluctance to meet anyone halfway. I didn't care, and quickly I set up a meeting for later that day. I drove over as soon as I could, arriving at the location. I had to agree with the others who had contacted the poster. It took me hours to arrive, and it was located on the very edge of town. I pulled off the road onto the dirt path that served as a driveway. The house itself seemed to be part of a farm, although looking around it, It seemed that the field had not been taken care of in years, heavily overgrown with grass and weeds. I parked and approached the door, but before I reached the old porch, a bearded man, perhaps in his late 50s, opened the door. I greeted him and introduced myself. He nodded and invited me in to look at the computer. Barely containing my excitement, I followed along behind him as he led me to a room towards the back of the house. Opening the door, I was shocked. Posters, strategy guides, and game cases littered the room. Despite several moving boxes, it was already quite full. In fact, the only space not involved with packing or clutter was the modest desk, holding the sleekest computer I had ever seen. It was clearly worth thousands of dollars. And, as I looked it over, I asked the man why he would give such an expensive machine away for free. He looked at me sadly, then glanced around the room. "It used to belong to my son," he said quietly. "His friends already claimed most of his other things, but I insisted that I keep this. I don't have any need for it, and I can't bring myself to accept money for it. It's better if there's nothing left to remind me." He went quiet then, and I knew I'd get no more answers. I accepted the computer, and he helped me load everything into the car. It was late night when I arrived home, nearly 1 in the morning, but I was too excited to wait. The old man's claims it had belonged to his son were upsetting, but I'd been without gaming way too long to care. I spent 10 minutes hooking everything up, and then I turned it on. It booted up using Windows 7, skipping a login screen. The desktop appeared. The background, a HD image of a couple sitting below the night sky. As I was glancing about the desktop icons, a Steam window appeared, notifying me. Connecting to Steam account, Mementoia. I assumed that this was the son's account and allowed it to load. I had my own account, of course, but I wanted to know what this fellow gamer had loaded onto his account. After a few seconds, Steam finished and revealed an amazingly small library of games. In fact, only one game was even installed, Bastion. I was admittedly confused and checked the installed programs, but it was true. Only Bastion was installed. Not that I minded. I didn't expect to get free games along with the computer, but Bastion was one I loved. So I settled in for a bit of a play. It loaded up normally, displaying the options of continue, new game plus, etc. I attempted to click continue, but after a few seconds of loading, an error appeared stating, "Cannot load game. Save file may have been deleted or corrupted." I shrugged and started New Game Plus. The game started, but instead of Rux saying, "I'll see you in the next one," there was a quiet sobbing sound. When Rux began his standard narration, he sounded very tired, and his script seemed subtly altered.
Proper story's supposed to start at the beginning. Ain't so simple with this one. Here's a kid whose whole world got all twisted, leaving him stranded alone. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
I began playing, walking down the path that rose before me.
Finds his lifelong friend just lying in the road, waiting for him like always.
Where the hammer should have been, a girl with long blonde hair stood, smiling. I'd never seen that character model in the game before, and it seemed to me to be far more beautiful than anything else in the game. As I approached her, she faded out, replaced by the hammer, which sported a golden sheen that matched the girl's blonde hair. I grew excited at this point. I realized it must be a modded game, a really polished one as well. To have a voice actor and a graphic artist so close to the original. I continued playing until I got to the saloon.
He sets foot inside one of his favorite watering holes. Inside is his lifelong friend. She's already had a few.
The girl was sitting at the bar, but began fading as soon as the screen loaded. This girl fascinated me. She was clearly the center point of this mod, but why? I jumped out the window to progress and landed in the sundown path.
Couples walk down the sundown path. She invites him for a stroll.
The girl was walking down the path as the kid pulled himself up. I followed after, eventually reaching a sky bridge. I took it and flew into the air. I landed in an area that I'd never seen before. It was a different style from the usual areas, solid ground as opposed to patchwork of squares. It was a night sky, full of stars and the moon hanging large in the sky. The girl was sitting on the grass, looking up at the stars. I walked over next to her and sat down.
And they all lived happily ever after.
The screen slowly faded to black. I smiled. That was sort of a touching ending.
Nah, just kidding.
Red splashed across the screen, dark and wet. A female scream pierced my ears and I jumped in my chair. The screen then faded in onto a street, the girl lying in the middle with the blood pooling around her. The narrator picked up again. His voice was now cruel and vicious.
Finds his lifelong friend just lying in the road, waiting for him no longer.
I walked over to the body and the scene changed again. It was a field. The kid standing in front of a headstone. He looked visibly depressed, and tears flowed down his face.
Proper story's supposed to start at the beginning. Ain't so simple with this one. His story starts with an ending. Goes to see what's left of his lifelong friend, cold and buried in the ground.
Looking at the scene, it seemed familiar, but I couldn't place it. The screen then faded to another scene. It was a room, very dark, lit only by a glow of a screen. The kid was barely more than a silhouette, slumped over a desk. He looked extremely depressed. And then the narrator came again.
Here's a kid whose whole world just got all twisted, leaving him stranded alone. What's there left to do when your world's come undone?
An option selection screen, similar in style to the regular ending, appeared, with the options Continue On and Surrender. I selected Continue. The scene changed, and I was in the Bastion at night, all buildings unlocked. I began to visit them, one by one. The distillery.
Tries to drink away the pain, but he can't drown his soul in spirits. Not this time.
Mori Midori acquired. The shrine.
Curses the gods for their cruelty. They don't respond.
Silver Cross acquired. The memorial.
Memories just make it hurt. Hurts worse to forget though.
Memory locket acquired. The lost and found.
Her stuff's already been given away. He snags what he can.
Hidden diary acquired. The forge.
Tinkering about with toys distracts him. Not for long.
Dream computer acquired. The arsenal.
He lashes out at the world for a spell. Can't fight what's in your own mind though.
Straight razor acquired. After visiting them all, I went to the sky bridge, only to find the bedroom again. Oddly familiar. Again, the option flashed up. Continue.
Kid can't keep holding on like this forever.
Continue.
Can't keep fighting.
Continue. It was getting hard to select now, as if some part of me just couldn't keep going.
Just let him go.
Continue. The kid looked at me, directly at me. as if he could see me through the screen. His eyes, they held so much pain and suffering, I almost couldn't bear it.
There's only one way out now.
The options screen again. Surrender. It took me to the main menu screen. New Game Plus had been replaced with New Game Minus. I chose it. What else could I do? From behind me, the narrator came, voice dry and raspy.
Proper story's supposed to start at the beginning. Ain't so simple with this one. This story starts with an ending.
I looked at the kid. He was resting on the stone bed, blood soaking in it and the floor, his wrists slashed open.
Here's a kid whose whole world got all twisted, leaving him stranded alone in a world without love. Lost the only one that mattered to him. What else was there to do?
The girl appeared at his bedside, frowning sadly. She began fading out as flames began appearing at the sides of the screen. The voice was now a whisper, right into my ear.
He died to join her, but now he'll never see her again.
I turned around quickly to look behind me, but only the darkness of my room was there, and nothing more. I turned back to the monitor. Bastion had closed itself, as well as Steam. I reopened Steam, but it only opened to a blank login screen, as if I'd only just installed it. I looked in the file directories, just to make sure, but nothing was there. It was only after this that I noticed the desktop image changed. Now, a bright light shone in the sky, like an aurora, and a sinister-looking shadow was cast on a far hill, as if a terror was silhouetted by fire. The spot where the couple had sat before was bare, save for a bloodstain on the grass. I quickly shut down the computer and turned on my lamp before crawling into bed. I didn't sleep that night. It wasn't until much later I remembered where I saw the field in that bedroom. The field near that house, where she now rests in peace. His bedroom, where he bled from slit wrists to see her again. Both taken by that cruel, unfeeling narrator of our lives and deaths. I still hear him sometimes. If I'm awake on the computer late at night, just behind me, just louder than the soft whir of the cooling fans.
I'll see you in the next one.
The title itself doesn't strike fear into anyone who reads it now, does it? But if you'd experienced the events that took place in the game that I had, you too would understand why it creeps me out, and why it will surely play a large factor in my decision to play any future Harvest Moon games. It was like any other weekend. My siblings and I sat together with our family at home at the dining table, enjoying the company of each other as our Oma, grandma, droned on and on about a trip to San Antonio, in which she went to participate in some event. When a visit reached its end, she handed us each $20 for our allowance. The four of us were thrilled to have gotten so much from her at once, since she usually gives us $10. Now, we all know how hard it is to save money when you're young. It's even harder to do when you're a gamer and you live for about 5 minutes away from a game store, and you haven't stepped foot inside said store in like forever. But now looking back, I wish that I hadn't spent my money that day. It's something about stepping into GameStop that makes my heart race. I don't know if it's the smell of the store, or the fact that I'm surrounded by so many great titles. But whatever the reason may be, I know I never leave that store unhappy. Not even when I leave without buying a game. But on this day, I left slightly heartbroken. My youngest sibling stayed home. My little brother couldn't find his money, and my youngest sister isn't much of a gamer. So it was just me and my little sister. The chimes rang overhead as we entered the store, and my sister made a beeline for the Nintendo 3DS games, since she'd been saving money on the side for Tomodachi Life. I too own a Nintendo 3DS, but the game I was really after was Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, blue or red. Since I'd played Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time and Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of the Sky, I thought, why not add to the Mystery Dungeon collection with an old game, since I couldn't afford a new one for the 3DS. But as I made my way to the GBADS section, I noticed to my dismay that the small shelf was void of all games except one: Harvest Moon, The Tale of Two Towns. I wasn't sure if I wanted it or not. I walked away several times, but found myself going back to that game. I always loved the series, ever since my mum bought me Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life for the GameCube, and it seemed wrong not to take it home. Besides, I seen it in the eShop on my 3DS and pondered buying it, so might as well, right? When it came to our time to pay, I requested the Harvest Moon game. The cashier nods slightly and fetches the game. When he returns, he looks a little uneasy, but I don't really think anything of it at the time. He bags the games and turns to me and says in a slightly urgent tone, "You know we have a policy for these games. After 3 days you can return it if you are unsatisfied." I found it odd, since he hasn't breathed a word of this to any of his previous customers, nor has he told this to my sister. So why me? I thank him in advance for the advice, as my sister and I leave the store. Looking back on the situation, I wonder if he was trying to tell me something about the game, and it makes me wonder if he knew something was wrong with it. Despite what happened in the store, I was anxious to play the game. After watching my sister play Tomodachi Life, I went upstairs and began to play my new game. It started as any other Harvest Moon game, a small cutscene and upbeat music before cutting to the title, displaying the name in typical Harvest Moon fashion, with the main name on a wooden panel and bubble letters of the spin-off name. When I clicked A, it gave me the options Continue and New Game. Naturally, I proceeded with a fresh start, and proceeded with the process of picking my gender, name, birthday and season. After which, it followed another cutscene, of which your character is going down the road to start their new farm or ranch life, and has an accident, in which the cart breaks, your horse is hurt, and your character suffers from slight amnesia and forgets which town they wanted to go to. They were later greeted by both mayors of Bluebell and Konohana. Both mayors described their towns, and I chose Konohana since it sounded like Konoha from Naruto. After a quick session on how each button worked and what button did what, I was finally able to play the game. Unlike the other town, Konohana is well known for growing crops, while Bluebell is known for their livestock. I had my character, Erikusu, spend the first day exploring, getting used to the map of the world. The next day, Erikusu was taken down to the town and given a tour of Konohana by the mayor. When we arrived at the tunnel connecting the two towns, Erikusu was told that the tunnel was blocked off, making a trip to the other town a long journey which required going through the mountain. After what the mayor tells Erikusu, she leaves her at the hotel, triggering the harvest goddess to appear, and she tells Erikusu the story behind the blockade. Then we find out that she blocked it because she was annoyed with the mayor's fighting, and as always is asking you to solve this feud yourself because she's too lazy. And then we find out the only way to stop the fighting is to enter the cooking contests. Agreeing to this, I finally get to start my free play once again. I decided to buy some crops for my farm to start making money and start preparing for the upcoming contest. I have Erikusu run to Gobe's, a cute little old man who dressed in traditional Asian clothing, where the seeds are sold. But when Erikusu reached the building, the song that was playing in the background stalled out, playing one monotonous note, and an exclamation point appeared over Erikusu's head. I wasn't too sure what to think of, but I brushed it off. Thinking it was a small glitch in the game, I moved Erikusu into the shop and walked around. Everything seemed normal. The room was styled like a Japanese home, with a counter in the center, as I had my character walk up to Gobe and talk to the old man. He said, "Go, it's waiting." The picture of the old man then shifted to a picture of him laughing. I wasn't sure if this was just a random comment that he might make, but it made me sit my 3DS down for a moment before continuing. I know from my previous knowledge of Harvest Moon games that they, the characters, often say random things, but this was kinda creepy. Deciding to continue the game, I moved my character around to the counter and talked to Gobe so I could purchase the seeds. But all the text box held was a single word: sobbing. I was a bit confused, so I decided to give up on the seeds and return my avatar home. Upon leaving the shop, the music I noticed played slowly and the exclamation point returned, which soon switched to the ellipses and a text box popping up saying, "I think I'm forgetting something. I should go home." My screen turned white, and when the brightness faded, my avatar was back home, standing in front of the chicken coop. The music stopped, which doesn't happen until the late hours in all Harvest Moon games. Arikusu walked towards the coop on her own and entered it. The screen faded to black, and only one sound rung out, and that was the clucking of a chicken. When the game visual returned, I noticed a black chicken in the coop. I hadn't bought a chicken, because Konohana isn't about farm animals. The village thrives through its crops. I sat my game down and did research about the chickens in the Tale of Two Towns. What I found was that a lady named Jessica sells chickens to you at a good price, but you can obtain a free chicken if you choose Bluebell as the town to live in. But the chicken I had was only obtainable in the second year. I thought I was lucky. I didn't have to wait for the second year. I walked my character over to the book and sat on a crate in the coop. I figured it was the animal ledger that all HMs had. I was right. I noticed that they had icons of the animals you can collect and raise. The animals were sheep, cows, house pets, alpacas, owls, and chickens. All the animals I didn't own were shaded in blue, and I wasn't able to click on them. This included the chicken. I thought that was weird since it was in the coop. I walked my character towards the chicken and clicked A to hold it, but as I hit A, the chicken disappeared, with a loud sound which sounded much like a low distorted scream. The sound caused me to jump and drop my 3DS. I stared at the screen for a moment, and watched the screen cut to black, and then, more distorted static-like screams filled the silence before it all ended as my character woke up in the following morning. I moved Arikusu around the house, and around the farm to see if the chicken was still there, and I was relieved to see that the chicken was nowhere to be found. I proceeded to play the game normally, but I was still scared that I would have a run-in with the chicken. I decided to try and make money, since I knew that's required to expand the house and help boost friendship in this game. At one point, I decided to try and buy seeds again from the old seed farmer Gobe. When I walked to his shop, the song began to jump and skip beats before stalling on one continuous note when I reached the stairs, like it had last time I visited. Like last time, everything seemed normal until I spoke to Gobe. His picture showed him laughing, but the text box read, "Beware, it comes black." I was confused by this. I sort of felt like he was referring to the chicken I saw, but I dismissed it. I bought my seeds for that season and got Arikusu home and began to plant my crops. But each time I plant my crops, the sound effect for the seeds being placed looped. I would have to enter and exit either the barn, my house, or the coop to make it stop. I sent Arikusu to bed after saving, because the whole back and forth with the looping and having to enter and exit buildings was just too much. But when the screen went to black, a text box popped up saying, "It's coming." I thought it was the Harvest Goddess talking, since she and the Harvest Sprites are known to have little moments like this, where they speak to your character, implying that they are dreaming. As the days passed in the game, my crops would always die and never grow, leaving me broke and without crops. I thought it was because I was in the wrong season with them, but I'd always look up at the crops for the current season before I bought them. Frustrated with the failed crops, I decided that it was time for a break. I saved the game, ignoring the pop-up saying it's almost here, and turned off my game. I decided that I'll try again the next day and take a different approach, at least when it comes to making money. The next morning, I decided to play the game again, but when I selected the icon for the Tale of Two Towns, the screen froze. I reset the 3DS and tried again. This time, red and blue lines appeared on the top screen, and the bottom screen was static. I thought it was the system, so I tried one of my apps, and it worked fine. I tried loading several of my old games, and they worked fine. It was only when I tried loading the game a third time that it finally loaded. and it went to the title screen, and the usual cute title was now jumbled up symbols. And the dates that shown how long the series ran said 1629 to 1692. I stared at the date and shrugged, not really thinking much of it. I continued to play it and came up with an easier plan to make money. I decided I'd just be better off scavenging around the mountain, selling what I'd found. Within a few hours in real life, and a few months in the game, the mayor had visited Arikusu again, and told me about the ability to move to the other town, and that I could always come back to this one if I ever wanted to. I thought it'd be a nice change, and maybe I'd have better luck making money off my animal products, since crop growing clearly failed. I moved Arikusu to Bluebell the same day, and I was thrilled, because I was finally able to own animals and sell products that they produced. That same day, I decided to save and tour the town the next day. But as I saved, I got a message saying, "Wretched girl." I wasn't sure if they were referring to me or to Arikusu. The next morning in the game, the mayor of Bluebell visited. When he visited, all that his text said was, "You wretched girl." The avatar image of him was the one of him angry. He said nothing more as he turned away from Arikusu and left her home. Time in the game passed fairly quickly, as I had the tunnel slowly cleared out, and I entered the food contests to build up the friendship levels of the mayors. And before I knew it, I'd filled all the hearts for the mayors. The next day in game, there was a cutscene. The screen was black, and a white font appeared saying, "You serve him. We all serve him." Then it faded to white and showed my character in the house where the old lady from Konohana appears, telling me to go to the mountain. Another cutscene followed, and Arikusu was at the mountain. Both mayors were at the edge, as the villagers from both towns stood nearby. The son of the mayor from Konohana shouted something, but the text was distorted. The mayors looked at one another, then to the crowd, when suddenly, little speech bubbles appeared over their heads, showing skulls. The crowd then had exclamation points over their heads, and the mayor stepped forward, causing the crowd to step back a little bit. No music was playing in the game, nor was there any sound. The mayors kept advancing, and as soon as they reached the crowd, the screen glitched, showing me a red screen. I was about to reset when a soft sound was heard coming out of the speakers. It sounded like laughing, but before I could really make out what the sound was, it cut to the credits. The game was over, and as the credits rolled, a slow eerie version of Ring Around the Rosie played out. Notes would occasionally be skipped, and often the sounds of faint child chuckles would play. The names that were scrolling through, I've never seen listed before in any Harvest Moon games, nor with Natsume or Nintendo. The names that were listed seemed like old names from long ago. I don't remember all the names, but I know that they all sounded familiar. I know I read or heard them somewhere. The screen then faded to black, and the text box opened saying, "Continue?" with the option of yes and no. I clicked yes. The game flashed, then crashed with the screen fading to black, and it froze on the black screen with the words, "May God bless them." I was done at that point. I believe in God and I love him. My parents taught us about the holy book, but this game seemed evil in a way that I didn't like. I wanted nothing more than to throw it away and save someone else the trouble of dealing with this game. I told my friend about it on my DeviantArt account, and he said that he wanted to film the game to stick on YouTube. I reluctantly agreed, but each time we tried to record it, the game and system would appear to be off. We tried with many different cameras, and it all resulted in the same outcome. He told me that I should try playing it again, and I reluctantly agreed. The game this time started around normally, no freak startups or mess ups. In the game, it was year 2, and I decided to add to my livestock since my Jersey cow Annie and my normal cow Hanji and my sheep Marco were doing so well, occasionally producing gold items. I decided to add to my chickens because I always needed eggs for some odd reason, and Ymir, Tony and Krista were producing a lot. I just needed more. I had Arikusu head over to Jessica's livestock and talk to Jessica. Instead of a usual message of "Welcome to Jessica's livestock," She said, "If they float, then they're..." The screen then cut to the livestock list. I scrolled down and I was thrilled to see that she had a new animal. But I immediately felt dread when I realized what kind of animal it was. She had the silky chicken in stock. My friend told me to go ahead and buy it. He said he highly doubts it's the same chicken. I had to agree with that, and decided to buy the chicken. I named the chicken Connie and made Arikusu go back to the farm. When she entered the barn, Connie had the skull icon above his head, meaning he was sick. I was confused. In previous Harvest Moon games, you were always given healthy animals. Heck, my other animals came healthy. I had Arikusu run back to the store, and I bought animal medicine and used it on Connie. The next day in the game, I woke up only to find that Marco, my sheep, had died and that Connie was sick again. I bought medicine, used it on Connie. I also noticed that everyone I had a high friendship levels with had gone down, but I figured it was like in Harvest Moon Save the Homeland, how everyone is mad at you for the day telling you to be more careful. Well, the next day, Arikusu wakes, only to find that Ymira died and Connie was once again sick. This happened over and over, until all my farm animals had died, except Connie. Connie was now healthy, and would eat and run about. I noticed that my pets, Erwin and Levi, Big and Little Dog, Japan, my cat, and Kuhaku, my owl, wouldn't eat or go outside anymore. It wasn't until the following day that they were nowhere to be found. It was like the game erased them. The same thing happened to Cam, the florist, and the character I was trying to marry. I wasn't sure what to think. I stopped playing the game and went to GameFAQs, and asked them. Bought a chicken, and it was sick. The next day, and those that followed, one of my livestock died, except for one of my chickens, the one that I'd bought. My livestock were just a year old, and the bachelor I'm trying to marry, Cam, is gone, and it's not the days he's out of town. I never got a response to the thread, so I took it down. I decided that I'd sell Connie. I went to Jessica, and she wasn't there. I tried every time, but every day she was just gone. I decided to talk with Ash, even though he doesn't sell or buy animals, but he was gone too. At that point I decided to check the entire village. I had Arikusu check all the buildings and all the houses, but they were void of people and animals. I then had her run to the other village, but when I got there, the screen cut to black and text popped up saying, "They're dead, with their rings around their rosies, and their pockets full of posies." Then, another cutscene showing Arikusu. She stood facing the river, and the music that was playing stopped. Behind her, Connie appears and walks up before running towards Arikusu, before the screen cut to black. Only the clucking of the chicken can be heard, and the screen says, "The end. Your trial ran from 1629 to 1692. Thank you for sticking around to the end. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to leave a like. And if you want to hear more stories like it, don't forget to subscribe and click that bell icon. That way you'll never miss a story. Oh, and if you haven't already, don't forget to follow me on Twitter so you can keep up with the latest goings on the channel.